All right. All right, I'm going to call to order the February 11th, 2019 meeting of the Arlington Redevelopment Board, being recorded by ACMi. Andy, thank you for chairing the last meeting. And I heard it went well. Looked like it went well. First on our agenda this evening is an organizational meeting. I'm going to table that until February 25th, and I expect we'll have all 5 of our board members present. And move straight into number 2, proposed amendments to administrative corrections to the floodplain district, etc. We have Nathaniel Stevens, who's the chair of the Arlington Conservation Commission, and Emily Sullivan, who is the town environmental planner and conservation agent. If I could have you both come up, please, and direct us through what's ahead of us this evening.
Thanks, good evening.
Yeah, if I might, just to introduce this. So we wanted to have this opportunity to talk with Nathaniel and Emily about the proposed minor corrections and amendments. I have more of the draft copy of what that looks like and extra copies for others. These are things that we talked about during zoning recodification. I mentioned this previously. We had been working with Nathaniel and at the time Leela Shepard, who was the then environmental conservation agent, and also Kathy Garnett, who had been participating on the zoning recodification working group, to work through how, again, with recodification, we were looking at ways to reconcile, existing practices, policies, streamline the zoning bylaw, make it more clear and up to date, current practices, laws, all of those things. So when we were doing that, we found that these particular sections of the zoning bylaw had a couple of areas that needed to be updated, but we flagged other sections that we wanted to go back to at some later date. And so this is the later date. And in working with Emily and Nathaniel, have basically come up with the very modest corrections that are being presented to you tonight, and the ones that we filed as part of the warrant article. And so we wanted to have this opportunity for you to talk together about what that all means, and then also to talk about their amended, also have an opportunity to talk with them about their recently updated regulations, which include climate adaptation resiliency rules, and just to get a sense of what that means to the commission, some recent examples of how they're applying them, and what's in the future for how they might be looking at other updates to the regulations and how that might potentially intersect with other zoning amendments that we might entertain in the future. So I think that's, did I miss anything in the things that we talked about introducing?
No, I think that was it.
That's good.
So in front of you, you should have 2 draft copies. One is the floodplain district, one is the inland wetland district. As Jenny summarized, a lot of the proposed changes are really just minor kind of administrative changes, updating some of the references to different local and state regulations that were incorrect, or even updating some references to other parts of the zoning bylaw that the numbers were just incorrect for the sections. Otherwise, we took out some of the administrative language in terms of procedures. Then I guess there may have been a little bit of more of a change if you look at the inland wetland district. We changed a number of looking at the center line from 25 feet to 200, just to maintain some consistency with the definition of an inland wetland area. But really minor changes. If you have any questions, yeah. Sorry, a lot going on in front of you. Take a look at it and then be happy to answer any questions.
Can you explain the 25 feet to 200 feet?
Yes. So that's just the riverfront district as defined by the state, and even within our local regulations. We take the center line of the riverfront or the river, and then go 200 feet instead of the 25. And we just wanted to maintain that consistency, as a jurisdictional area.
So the 200 feet is the Conservation Commission jurisdiction?
Yes, yes.
Right, yeah, we were just pointing out, the commission looked through these and saw just what we would submit were just inconsistencies between the two sets of regulations, and if the idea is to incorporate a wetlands overlay district, make that consistent with what, if the board wishes to make it consistent with what the Conservation Commission considers wetland areas. And one of those is, as you know, the riverfront area, which goes out 200 feet from perennial streams, which include essentially Millbrook,
I can't find it.
Mystic River,
I can't find it.
Oh, so it's
and the Inland River. The Inland River is in section.
Oh, I got it.
of the,
Oh, got it. Right in the middle there. Here. Got you. Go ahead. Sorry. Interrupted.
So the Rivers Protection Act is relatively 1996 new, so something that had passed and the commission's jurisdiction had expanded 20 odd years ago now, and it seems that the zoning bylaws hadn't been updated, perhaps, or that section of the bylaws.
That's a good call. Man.
That provision,
Does the town have any intermittent streams that aren't subject to the 200 feet?
We actually just came up last night, what we call Bull Run, which is along the bike path up by Park Avenue, thanks. No Name Brook, yes.
if
It
you
runs
look at
parallel to the bike path there.
So
And then we have a couple of others, I think.
this doesn't exclude those in this definition, right? This says all rivers, brooks, and streams.
Right.
Should we be amending that to say all perennial?
A perennial, if you'd like to.
We need to
Yeah.
add the word perennial. So it'd say all land area along all perennial rivers, brooks, and streams, right? Is that more consistent with what you want?
And under permitted uses, it says no structure intended for human occupancy. Permitted uses. Permitted.
Where are you on the same page?
Yeah, I'm on page 1, 500.
584A.
But is that kind of, I mean, if you take Millbrook, you're covering a lot of houses. Those are grandfathered.
I guess that's a zoning question, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, for the Conservation Commission, certainly
Right.
people.
That's defining it.
It's defining the area.
Yeah.
We treat it differently, yes. We make them, they need to go through an alternatives analysis. I mean, there's some more leniency in our standards for single-family houses and two-family houses and lots that were created prior to 1996, which I'd imagine many of those along in those areas are.
Got it.
But it's I guess, you guys regulate use more so than we do, so I guess that's a policy question for you.
Is Vernon Pool, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Vernal pools, yes.
Is that addressed in here?
In here, I don't believe there's certainly no certified vernal pools in Arlington. I don't think there's even,
that I'm aware of.
there might be one in Mugar property, but yeah, no.
So there's none to be addressed in Arlington?
No, it's not an issue.
Okay.
We haven't run into it yet.
And they don't develop?
They could over time, I suppose.
So how would we address that then? Because I just saw that as kind of vague, and it comes and goes, and you have to go test it. And then once you've tested it and it's there, what do you do with it?
Right, right. And they're regulated in our bylaws if they're within another resource area. So like if they're within a wetland area, it would already be covered, so to speak.
Okay.
So we don't regulate, actually, sorry, I may have to take that back under the bylaw. I'd have to check. We might regulate them separately, but certainly under the state act, it has to be within a floodplain, within or a riverfront area, within a flood zone, within a wetland.
But this definitions don't mention vernal pools, so
No.
I don't think they're covered in the wetland district.
Okay. I'm just...
Yeah, I'm just, that's what I mean.
Jenny, what's the next step with
So,
these?
can,
Sorry, go ahead, Gene.
yes, it follows up on Andy's question. So we're making our definition consistent with the Conservation Commission. And I understand it certainly makes sense. The impact, though, is then any structure in that district, any shall not be erected, constructed, altered, enlarged, or otherwise created or moved unless a special permit from the ZBA or some cases, the ARB. So that would mean if somebody's going to put new windows in, they have to go in front of the ZBA, because that's altering a house that's within the 200 feet.
I don't think that fits the definition of alteration necessarily.
Under the
For-
Wetlands Act, we wouldn't look
You
at it.
wouldn't, no, you wouldn't look at it, but this is different, but this is
But the
different.
ZBA may want to.
But the ZBA may want to. Right, so I just point that out, that just follow up on what Andy said, that's
okay.
what happens. It's,
Okay. Anything else, Gene? Ken?
not on the inland wetland
Okay.
district.
No, Jenny?
So, so you were asking the next step?
Yes.
I mean, the next step is, so Thursday is when all of the articles are being advertised
Mm-hmm.
for the first time, so that's leading into the public hearings. These particular amendments, I would have to check which night they're on, but we can loop back onto that one. I think it's the second night for these ones.
I do have a question related to floodplain district, though, if we,
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
no,
sure.
go
if
ahead.
we've gone on to that one.
Go back to that.
So this concerns the boundaries. What do we do with climate change and projected climate change and projected changes in the floodplain districts? How do you handle it at the Conservation Commission now?
We haven't, we need to address that. We haven't addressed that as I think other communities have been addressing it, which is making reference to various models or projections about, this is more about sea level rise, I guess. So you could extrapolate that into, I guess, increases in floodplain.
Right.
I've been actually preparing for the MACC annual conference, looking at what other towns, municipalities have been doing, and some actually define their floodplain as either the FEMA, the highest observed flooding, or any other credible source.
So should
someone
we
could-
keep this the way it is, or should we do that?
It's up to you. I mean,
That's
it's,
not a
yeah.
fair answer.
Well, no, it is. I mean, I'm sorry. It's up to what the zoning board would like to have in their jurisdiction. I think the commission is going to, at some point when we next revise our regulations, which I'm not sure when that is, we would like to, I think our next step would be to incorporate some of these, the accepted models, the more reliable models that project what sea level rise will be, what changes will be in the floodplains.
So far this is consistent with what you do, and maybe we would consider altering it after you alter yours? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Potentially.
Okay,
Right. We're sort of following in their footsteps at the moment.
got it.
Isn't it basically FEMA that?
FEMA is, and actually, though I'm reading this now here, we should check, I don't have a full copy of our regulations with me, but I think,
do.
oh, do you? So I think we actually do allow other credible evidence. This is what we ran into in the first go-round, or the go-round about 15, 16 years ago with the Mugar parcel. They proposed a delineation of the floodplain according to what at that time was the old FEMA maps, the 1982 FEMA maps. So at that point they were 20 years old, and we had lots of testimony from neighbors and residents in East Arlington saying, well, no, in fact, the floodplain, the 100-year flood or 100-year storm, the flooding came much farther than it was. So we actually used it because I think we have or other credible evidence standard. So the FEMA maps were the default at the time, but our regulations allowed us, and I think our bylaw allows us, I'm pretty sure our bylaw allows us to utilize other credible evidence, and we found that the neighbors' testimony, pictures, and things like that was credible, and actually the developer appealed, and we were upheld by the appeals court in our decision.
So maybe we
You
could,
could
maybe we could
parallel
take a
that
look at that
language.
and parallel the
Yeah.
language. So if we need a few more words
Yeah,
added
sorry I
to
didn't catch
it.
that earlier, but.
The hearing actually is on March 4th for these two sections. So that's the night that we're going to have a public hearing for these, just so you know.
So if we're going to incorporate these couple of changes we mentioned, we should do that. So
We will
those-
do it then.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else? Go ahead, keep going.
Sorry. On the procedures, explain again why you deleted most of the procedures. This is 5.7.6 in the floodplain district.
So our understanding was there were attempts to kind of standardize the procedures for the zoning bylaw, and so, some of these were redundant, or, there was existing language in other sections of the bylaw that covered, these districts.
The procedure.
The procedure, yeah,
Through
the
special
procedures
permit
that you would have to go
procedure.
through for.
It's already acknowledged through that process. So the procedure that you have to go through to have a special permit is captured in 3.3.
Right, but I didn't look to cross-reference it, but does it require we get a report by the Conservation Commission? I don't remember that.
I think
My
we have
recollection may
mentioned
be
to,
failing
of
on
whether or
that.
not you need to, and we can go into the section, I don't have it exactly right in front of me, but we have that, and then also in our board rules and regulations, we also speak to the need to
I'm
have that.
fine with deleting everything that was deleted here as long as we can
It's captured
find
elsewhere.
the equivalent somewhere
Yeah.
else.
And we're actually in the midst of doing a crosswalk between whatever amendments are being proposed and then how that changes the existing bylaw. So in the guide document, we'll speak to that. The same
That
same
would
way
be
that we did
helpful,
the
yeah,
guide
just to
for
have
recodification.
descriptions.
Yeah.
We
So
covered it.
we'll have that kind of.
Because I like the idea. Got it.
And just to be clear, that wasn't something that came from Emily as the environmental planner. That wasn't necessarily something the Conservation Commission really cared about. I mean,
Yeah, no, and that's
just
an
make clear,
overarching
so,
goal
yeah,
of
go
zoning
over, yeah.
recodification, is to clarify and make everything consistent, take out redundancies.
Definitely.
That makes sense. Okay.
So we'll have a description of what it was and why we took it out, or where it's
And
covered.
where
it is now.
resides now.
Right.
Great.
Good. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for coming.
We need
We
to
want to
do,
talk about the
Do we need
climate,
anything else?
the section 31 there.
Yeah, no, we don't need to vote.
Regulation.
We'll be, this has been presented to us as kind of a courtesy before we have our public hearing on that on the 4th of March. So, go ahead.
Sure, thanks. So we were in the midst of revising our regulations. This draft that we finally finished was about a year-long process, and as we were wrapping up in, I guess, January of 2018, the MVP process was starting. So we had one member of our commission going to the, you guys are familiar with the
This
MVP
is the
process?
municipal vulnerability preparedness planning process that we did and we completed for the town. So we now have recommendations for climate adaptation and resiliency and have put it into, it's basically an action plan for the town. And as a result of having that MVP plan, it actually enabled us to apply for funding. Almost $400,000 was received to do a demonstration project along Millbrook, which is one of the recommended areas where we wanted to
That's great
make sure
news.
we're addressing climate resiliency issues, and there's plenty more to come.
Good.
So through that planning process, we had a lot of other things happen, which includes this.
And so although the MVP process wasn't finished, I think it was midway through, the commission member who was participating heavily said, well, we should try to throw in some climate change resiliency language into our regulations just to sort of get the ball rolling. So Yeah, it probably would have been advantageous to wait another 3 or 4 months to have that process complete. We would have had better language and things, but we decided at that point we needed to get it done. We needed to push it over the finish line. So we did develop this section 31 about climate change resilience, and the goal was really to just get people starting to think about this, make them aware of climate change issues and resiliency and adaptation, and have them, again, start thinking about that, how the work they're proposing before the commission, how their design considerations might take that into account. And as you can see from here, describe how your stormwater runoff will be handled, which in the instance of an increase in storm surges and extreme weather events, and give particular attention to vegetation and planting plans and things like that. So it's really a narrative, again, to get people thinking without necessarily creating additional standards, because we really, at that point, we would have to expand, I think, the bylaw a bit to get authority from town meeting to expand it a bit more. But again, within what we had, to be able to have people start thinking about climate change and how their projects might affect the ability of the wetland resource areas to act as a buffer for climate change. I mean, different precipitation patterns, changes in temperatures, extreme drought, extreme high temperatures, extreme cold temperatures, and all those types of things. So that's why you'll see cross-references on the page 44 at the top, the 4 elements that an application is to consider in writing and include in their application. There's cross-references to other portions of our regulations. And in fact, we already had, I'd like to say we were really ahead of the game in terms of already, for instance, with stormwater management, we relied on a different set of
This is page 44.
inputs into our stormwater calculations that actually had a greater amount of rainfall when you're doing your stormwater management calculations than the state requires under the Wetlands Protection Act and under the state stormwater management standards. So we had already sort of incorporated some of those conservative assumptions, planning for the future, planning for the more worst case scenarios, was already in our regulations.
Can I ask a question related to that?
Yep.
So when we get to see some projects, they've gone to the town engineer's office, and the town engineer certifies, that they're going to be able to capture 100-year storm on site, for example. But they use the old TP40 numbers and not the new numbers. Because I asked once.
Yeah,
You guys now require the new numbers?
we do.
Have you been able to convince the town engineer's office that when they do their stormwater stuff, they should require the
We're
new
working on
numbers?
it, yeah.
We're working on updating
I
the
think that's
stormwater.
really
We are.
critical to do
Yeah,
that.
I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah.
Because there's one that we approved where I was like, really? You can hold a 100-year storm event on site?
Yeah, because they were relying on TP40.
Yeah, okay. So you're working on that.
Yeah, I work with them a lot on stormwater, so I think we're making a lot of progress in terms of updating, those regulations and stuff.
Okay.
Good, good. Excuse me.
So we've had a few projects come in and have had this narrative. It's varied. Usually it's the folks who come in with consultants rather than the property owners have a more detailed narrative perhaps, but I would say it is successful in terms of getting people to start to think about it and write about it and have the commission think about it a little bit more than we have in the past. So I think in that way it's a success. Perhaps at this point, as I was alluding to before, we need to now make reference to the more available resources that are out there. The Cornell numbers may now be out of date. There may be better numbers to use that are more conservative, or FEMA numbers. Maybe there's a better source for projecting what the floodplain will be in 10 or 15 or 20 years. So I think we will the next time we review the regulations, which I don't think the commission has the appetite to do for a while, we will certainly incorporate those in.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Sure, thanks.
These are nice.
Yeah, thank you. See you on the 4th, Fred. More.
Yep.
Please, join us on the 4th. Moving on to our agenda number 3, which is submitted warrant articles and the outreach plan. Shannon.
Sure, so what is in the packet tonight is basically just I wanted to give you the listing of all the articles that were filed, just so you had that officially in hand. I don't know the actual date of when the warrant will be published, but I'm guessing soon. The legal notice, as I mentioned, is going to be out on Thursday, 14th. And the companion, text, we're working on that. We'll distribute that. We have had a meeting with the zoning bylaw working group. They've reviewed a draft of all of the text for all of the proposed amendments. So that's the zoning bylaw amendments. The outreach plan, again, similarly, I just wanted to give back to you a copy of the final outreach plan as amended from the last meeting. And then the only thing that I would just add to that is we have to use Aaron's phone for this, but we did actually, we did actually have the hearings are posted for March 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th. They're all happening in the senior center, as you know. But we do have a plan for which nights different content will be on the agenda. So for example, the first evening, I think is our most important one, because we have Roger from the sign, the consultant from the sign consultant, who is available that evening to make a presentation to the board during the public hearing, and that's the only evening that we have him coming. He's going to be in town that day, so that's the night that has to happen. So we've posted the public hearing so that it's clear that evening we will hear about the sign bylaw amendments. But we've also proposed to do other things that we can talk about in a second. The other thing I will note is that every agenda that is posted will outline what will be on that hearing deck for that next evening. So we cleared this all with town council's office so that we could post the hearing. It shows that it's continued through until obviously the work is completed through the 25th.
There's a question coming.
And then just quickly, let me just go through Aaron will actually speak to the order of
which articles on which
the
night.
articles.
So March 4th, we follow along
Can you
with.
send us this afterward?
I will, yeah.
Okay,
I
thanks.
didn't get it into the packet in time, sorry.
If
But
we,
it'll all be posted on Thursday,
yeah,
as in the hearing. This is the hearing notice.
yeah,
Oh,
so
great.
on March 4th, the zoning bylaw amendment for sign regulations, zoning bylaw amendment for the floodplain district, zoning bylaw amendment for the inland wetland district, zoning bylaw amendment for the review of religious and educational uses, and zoning bylaw amendment correcting citation errors. That's all March 4th. Starting on March 11th, zoning bylaw amendment for density and dimensional requirements for multifamily uses, zoning bylaw amendment, density and dimensional requirements for mixed use, zoning bylaw amendment for open space requirements for multifamily uses and mixed use, zoning bylaw amendment for townhouses. That's all March 11th. Starting on March 18th, zoning bylaw amendment, upper story building stepbacks, zoning bylaw amendment, reduced height buffer area, zoning bylaw amendment, corner lot requirements, zoning bylaw amendment, apartment building parking requirements, zoning bylaw amendment, parking reduction applicability, and zoning bylaw amendment, bicycle parking. Again, that's all March 18th. March 25th, zoning bylaw amendment for accessory dwelling units, zoning bylaw amendment for affordable housing requirements, zoning bylaw amendment, publication of supporting documentation for the Zoning Board of Appeals, zoning bylaw amendment for definition of the half-story, and lastly, zoning bylaw amendment for the driveway slope adjustment. Again, March 25th.
And those last two are 10 registered voters articles.
The last four.
Last four are, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
articles.
Okay.
Two of those, though, are
I see you when I'm
filed
gonna have
on
you hold your question until we're through this, and I'll leave you a chance.
Two of those are actually filed by, through citizen petition, but they're actually on behalf of the residential study group, just to be clear.
Okay. Okay.
So I just wanted to make sure that you had the final version of all of the language that was filed, and that is going to be published on Thursday, and that you also have the outreach plan.
These are all the public hearings, right?
These
Yes,
are all the public hearings where we'll go until we're done. Everybody will give you full opportunity to speak and state their case. We'll go through all the language, and then I have to discuss with Jenny how we're going to hold our votes. But typically we'll have a hearing and then vote at the subsequent meeting. But given that we have 4 meetings coming up, all of which are going to be chock full of business, I think I want to discuss that with Jenny before we decide how that's going to happen. But that's a procedural item, not.
But, I'm sorry.
You go first, no, no, go.
But didn't we also, I'm feeling like the 11th, 18th, and 25th, the items there, we're going to see, I don't want to be seeing that for the first time at that hearing.
Of course. Yeah.
So we can have on a meeting agenda or whatever, so that we can see the stuff beforehand and discuss it and see, I think what Andy had pushed for before was some graphics, further explaining what that was all about and all that kind of stuff. And so do we have time somewhere between now and then to do that?
On the 25th, your next meeting is the one where we will be discussing that.
So we'll have, I mean, I had the same
You
question.
won't
I had the same
necessarily, so with
question.
working with MAPC, we're doing the build-out analysis, the select visualizations, and then a shadow study. That work is it's underway. I don't know where it will be at on the 25th. We'll, whatever we have, we will share on the 25th. But we also said that it would likely be during the time that the hearings are happening in March. So we'll get to you what we have available, but that's the next time that we can talk about it, before the public hearings actually happen.
I had the same question as Kim did, and to me, this process would be better if we got the actual draft proposed changes to the bylaws. We had a meeting, could discuss them, and we might want to
Make
alter
changes.
them, make changes so that when they go out for public hearings, we would have already had our input into them. If we're not getting them in time to do that, then I think the process is less than ideal.
So the public hearing notice is the warrant, is what you already approved, this language that's here.
Right, but I'm concerned about the actual language. Like,
So the
I'm
actual-
really, here's an example. I'm really concerned about the changes our expert is proposing to make to the sign bylaws. I've said this before. I'm probably going to disagree unless he comes around on big chunks of it. I would like to have that far enough in advance of one of our meetings so I can think about it. Maybe I'll say it's all great, but maybe I want to spend a few hours rewriting pieces of it and presenting an alternative for the board to look at. So that's just one example, but with so many coming up, if we don't have the actual versions of what the public, I hope, is going to see, which is here's the actual wording of the zoning changes, I don't think it's a very good process.
So
I agree.
And we need to have an opportunity, I think, to weigh in on those before they go out to the public, because if we want to change them, what I think the public should see is the versions with what we think they should be and not an earlier version. That's where I am on it.
Go ahead, Jenny.
So what we had planned to do was have the guides available, the FAQs available, and the zoning language available all at the same time. So it wasn't overwhelming people to understand what was being changed and why, kind of similar to recodification. That said, what we have drafted so far, which is almost completed, I think, at this point, we can send that out to you tomorrow. We're happy to do that. That's not any, like I said, we talked about it at the zoning bylaw working group last week, and they actually had a version of that the week before, on the Friday prior to that meeting. So we're glad to send that to you now. But the next time we can technically discuss it is still on the 25th. Unless you schedule another meeting between now and then, that's the next available time for us to discuss it as a group. Of course, I think the deadline for comments from the zoning bylaw working group is the week prior to the 25th. So that could be another opportunity to provide us with comments, at least in writing, that we would have, and then we could also have those in time for the meeting on the 25th.
Well, it sounds like it would be advantageous to get and incorporate their comments before
Right.
before they come to us, and it then sounds like we should get it enough days before the 25th so that we can dive in. I'm sort of feeling like, considering we also have that hearing for the project on Sunnyside Ave, we may not have enough time on the 25th, depending upon, you know, when we look at them, what we think about them. So we may need to have a meeting between the 25th and March 11th, too.
March
I hate-
March 4th.
March 4th, I'm sorry, I hate to say that.
When will the graphic materials be ready?
I think we had said it would take them, or they said it would take them through the month, so that technically would be the end of next month, or this month rather. But I think that they got a little bit of a delayed start, so I don't know exactly when we'll have them, but we can follow up with MAPC to find out.
Yeah,
the
I think
exact
that's going to
date.
be the most helpful thing to have. So,
And if they can happen by February 25th, that would be great, I understand that.
Can
based
you
on
give
this
us a
conversation.
list of what those, a detailed list of what they will be? I don't even know. Is it a map? Is it
The build-out analysis, what that will look like?
any of the above?
Okay,
Anything that helps with the density, the whole story that
yeah,
we need to articulate.
okay,
yeah, I think if everything that's ready could be sent so that we know where we are and it can be updated for a formal agenda, it would be
course.
helpful for us to get a handle on. So, okay.
okay.
And then we'll get through the neighborhood meetings, which will be similar to what we did during recodification last year. We'll have members of the board there for question and answer to get through the process. Anything else in the outreach plan anybody wanted to discuss or you wanted to point out to us?
No, this incorporates the board's comments from the last meeting.
Okay.
I'll just point, I will not be here on March 11th, but I will watch the video.
Okay, good. All right, anything else on the agenda item?
No.
Go ahead.
We're gonna have the neighborhood meetings, right? Is there gonna be an all-town meeting somewhere here?
No,
But
there's
that's not
another-
happening.
There's not another meeting, another all-town meeting. It's just the neighborhoods.
Okay, because I thought we talked about that last,
We talked about an all-board meeting.
Yes.
I'm still trying to figure out if that's possible and how I can make that happen. if
okay,
I
so right now, on all board meetings, not,
can. Not scheduled at this time, no.
okay. And then, after the neighborhood meetings, we have those 4 neighborhood meetings, how, if there were some comments that need to be incorporated from those meetings, how does that get folded in and reviewed by us? Looks like it just goes right in. I don't see where there, we say, okay, we met with the town and we talked about these issues. These we feel like were some good comments, but we need to talk about amongst ourselves about that. And I don't see there's another meeting set aside. I'm not trying to add all these meetings, but I just don't see that.
Do you mean an ARB meeting?
Yes.
Oh, and the next ARB meeting would be April 8th. It's just not on this outreach plan, but that is technically the April meeting, and then the next meeting after that is technically town meeting.
And the idea is, as well,
But
It's
the
just-
the town meeting, the meetings at the different elementary schools would happen after our public hearings and after we'd already voted on the warrant, on the actual language of the articles that would go before town meeting. So we'll have had an opportunity to hear all the public's concerns and to go through all of our own discussions and analysis, as we usually do, to put something final together and vote on it. At that point, the only change that would happen would be an amendment anyway that we'd have to present separately at town meeting. So by the end of the night on the 25th, unless we schedule another meeting, Jenny can tell me if there's time at all to do this, unless we schedule another meeting after that to actually take a vote on everything, that's when what goes before town meeting will be in place. Whether we move forward on any and all of these articles, none of them, how different the wording is from what goes out to the public in the next week or so, next few days. That's when everyone has their opportunity to provide input. When we get to the neighborhood meetings, that's where we begin to, that's the outreach to town meeting members, where the process itself has been conducted, and we start to explain to them what they're going to be asked to vote on at town meeting.
So the 4 meetings in March is to get the input from the town.
Yeah,
And then the meeting on 4/8 is our turn to discuss amongst ourselves, but some of those comments are from those town meetings.
no, and that's, that's why I said we have to decide how we're going to vote on these things. So each night, each 4/11/18/25 has a slate there of zoning bylaw amendments that are going to be put before us to vote on, and then decide either to advance those to town meeting or to take no action on those. Those are the hours that we have planned, the full night that we have planned to go over them on our own, to take input from the public on their issues and concerns, to alter and change any wording that may be in those articles. And then at some point, prior to the end of the night on the 25th, again, unless we can put in another meeting after that to vote and take everything in, we may need to, if we're able to. That's when we will actually take our vote on the final document, final amendments to go forward. After that, there's sort of a limited opportunity to make changes at that point, because we'll have spoken as a board to put these items to town meeting. We can amend them at that point, but we have to go through the formal amendment process as any other town meeting, any other group going before town meeting would. So they'll be done, they'll be finalized by the end of March.
What's the date we have to have our report to town meeting? Because that's really the deadline for us.
Yeah.
April 8th.
April 8th?
April
Yeah, that would be the report.
Okay.
So,
Alright,
I mean,
so-
if you want to meet on April 1st, that would be another, I think that's the remaining Monday.
So that would give us, if we, I'm not saying we should, but we may end up meeting on April 1st. That'll still give us
What you
a
did during
week.
recodification was after your last hearing, you then scheduled a meeting on a Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. If the 25th is a Monday, is the 27th and the following Wednesday?
That's what I meant, yeah,
Yeah.
the 27th.
So if we
It's
could-
just that we don't, the hearing notice is already posted, we'd have to amend the hearing notice.
Mhm.
That would be the only thing.
So
So you
we
have to
could-
close the public hearing and then save your vote or talk about your,
Well, theoretically, we have these 4 meetings in March, we close
Right.
the public hearing, then we meet
Mhm.
the next week or whenever, and then we vote each one of them.
Right.
That's not what I'm hearing, though.
Oh, no, I know. I'm
That's
just
one way,
suggesting-
that is one way to do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just suggesting.
So
Otherwise, you'd have to vote the same night.
everything is being done in the same procedure process that it's always done before a town meeting. The difference is that instead of 2 or 3 articles going before town meeting, we have many more than usual that we're being asked to decide on and put forth. And I don't think the work itself is any more than, say, recodification, but the amount of votes and items that need to be discussed and taken into consideration is more than we're used to. So that's why I'm saying let's potentially consider how we're going to vote on these after we've taken every possible voice and consideration into our own analysis before we finalize these things. So it may make sense to add a meeting on March 27th solely for the purpose of the 5 of us to have a vote on every article at that point, where we'll have as close to the final draft as things are going to be. We can make any final changes at that point after we've had enough time to take things into consideration. And at that point, we vote on the entire slate of them.
And it wouldn't be an opportunity for public comment because they would have had 4.
Because they would have had 4
public
prior
comment.
meetings plus
Potentially
emails.
incorporating comments that
Right.
came out of the public.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's my thinking.
Mhm.
we
That makes
did
sense.
also connect with town council about this, as I mentioned, and you could vote on articles as they happen. I mean, so that is a possibility. So if there's some articles that you want to vote on because
Yeah.
So we talked about that at a prior meeting, and I think the way we've done things in the past is it gives us an opportunity to sleep on things in case we have any
Totally,
final,
yeah.
any final changes, if we want to think over things that we've heard from the public as we go over this. So I think pushing a vote to the end so that we make sure that we are taking into consideration every opportunity, every possible concern, that at that point, we've all had an opportunity to think these things through.
The other
Full.
advantage to the end is the second and third week are both have some of the density articles in it.
Mhm.
And it would be nice to consider them all in
Yes.
one and not do some of the density articles once and some of the
Yeah,
density
and if we
articles.
have discussion that we want to have as a board, at that point, the public has had ample opportunity to chime in, and
I think that's good.
at that point, I think we'll be in a good point to have fully considered everything that's out there.
So I think if we add one more meeting, the 27th, I feel very comfortable.
Yeah.
What you explain with the procedures, I'm on board with it.
Okay.
That would work for me too.
So I think what we'll do is March 4th, 11th, 18th, 25th, we'll allow for as much public comment as necessary. We'll have some presentation from staff as to what each article is. We'll have board question and answer time, and then take as much public comment as is necessary and warranted through each separate article, and then close each of those meetings. At the end of the March 25th meeting, I'll close any in-person comment, still allow for written commentary submitted to the board at that point, and then the 27th will be a meeting with just the 5 of us to go through and discuss and vote.
Plus,
Yeah.
Right, the staff
Yes,
presentation
staff.
piece. So the only thing I need to check is just amending the public hearing notice. It sounds like we would still need to amend the hearing notice.
Although if the hearing is closed on the 25th, the hearing notice is accurate.
So as long as you do officially close the hearing on the 25th, that's the thing.
that's the plan.
It's the plan. Well, would that allow for additional comment? Well, people can always write in comment after the fact, and we'll accept it. But I think the public, in-person public hearing meeting will be closed at the end of the 25th.
On the 25th.
On
But
the
we'll
25th.
confirm that
Okay.
back at town council.
Do we need to vote to add a meeting on the 27th, or can we do that by?
I think you should vote
All right, so
to do that.
I'll entertain a motion to add a board meeting on March 27th, location to be determined, but it'll be 7:30 p.m.
So motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Good. Okay. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. That allows for an extra couple of days for us to have thoughts and go over things before they have to be in. And then when is our next meeting after the 27th?
The April 8th.
That's April
meeting.
8th.
Yeah,
And then that's
so
the meeting that will actually,
You'll have the report. I think that what I'll do is I'll start drafting the report because of the 27th, the meeting on the 27th that you just added.
Mhm.
That'll allow me to understand how the votes went and what it all means, and then add any additional comment.
Okay.
And then I can get a draft to you like I've done previously, and then we can talk about it at the meeting on the 8th.
okay,
Okay.
good.
But we're getting a preliminary draft.
A preliminary draft. will be
Before the
sent to
meeting.
you
This week, right?
before.
Not of the report, no, but of the warrant, of the articles themselves.
Yes, and with
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
drawings or
Yep.
even a list of drawings.
You mean the build-out analysis? Sorry, I was talking about the report to town meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I'm
I
sorry.
totally agree with that.
Oh, all right.
And I was just adding on to it, saying that, recapping what Andy said was, we'll get like a list of illustrations or some illustrations, and then a draft of of this thing sometime this week.
Yes,
Yeah.
you'll have a draft, and we'll tell you, I'll send you again the scope of the build-out analysis, the visualizations, and then the shadow studies.
Yep.
We're still actually working on the locations of where those things will actually happen, the last 2 items.
Okay, good.
Sounds good.
No, it was a lot of work, and I have to
Yeah.
commend you guys for doing that.
Has been.
I mean, there's a lot of work there.
Yeah,
There's a lot that's been done. Anything else on this?
no, that was
Okay.
it.
And I know you had a question. Thank you for your patience. Name and address for the record,
Thank you.
please.
Asha Katka, 17 South Street, East Arlington. I'm just a little concerned that there's enough time for people who are from areas like East Arlington, along Mass Ave corridor, to have the voices heard and to share their real life experiences as residents.
The night of the public hearing and prior to,
Yes,
any person that wants to speak that's a resident of Arlington will be given the opportunity to speak for as much or as little time as they need.
Okay. I just feel like it's going to be so close to actual vote, and I'm actually new, even though I've been here for 21 years, and I have a lot of experience living to a mixed-use building, and as the speaker were talking about, climate change. Actually, my house almost burned down, the fence, when somebody threw a cigarette from the building next door on one of the hot summer days. I feel like it would be great for public to have a little time to share their experiences. People from Arlington Heights may not be aware of what it's like to live in Arlington, East Arlington. And I know there will be one day on 25th to sort of speak out, but sometimes people need time to sort of educate, talk about it, and maybe digest this information.
Sure. We also accept written comment, so if you'd like to write a letter to the board expressing your concerns, we're happy to include that in the record as
I
well.
speak very well English, and
So.
English is not my first language.
So.
I feel like in person, we had this forum with people divided in subgroups, but it was difficult to really learn a lot. I feel like I would like to hear from other residents and share my experiences and listen to theirs. And there were people from different walks of lives, people with children, people who are older. And it would be really great for people to have a little more time as citizens, as residents, to sort of talk to each other. And, this made me run for town meeting member, but not everybody will. And I feel like it would be great to have broader public input. Not on one just date, but maybe early.
There are 4 days.
Okay.
There are
Yeah,
4.
it's now.
But it's still,
Plus the public can go to the town meeting member meetings. I know those are after,
Can they
but
speak out then, open something to public? Because the
Yeah.
meetings that I'm
Yeah.
attending, like, we're not allowed to.
no, there are 4 more meetings that are open to the public, which are targeted at the town, your town meeting members,
Okay.
which are really important if you can go to those.
Because they're the ones voting on it.
I'm canceling all my plans, I'm going to those, but I'm just saying not everybody will be able to.
Sure. Well, that's why there's one on
Also, town meeting member, I think Ms. Papa's point is that there's not sufficient time between any of those hearings and town meeting for the public to really become educated on what will happen or what could happen if these articles pass. That is her point, if I understand it correctly.
Yes, because I've been going door to door getting signatures, and nobody in my, which is very active street, Silk Street, nobody knows about the proposed changes, even though some people actually used to be town meeting members. So I'm just saying, most of the public is just not aware for various reasons. People have, sickness in families and etc. I just feel like this would be great for transparency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to, please keep it brief, name and address for the record, but yes, go ahead.
Joanne Preston, 42 Stickley Drive, town meeting member, precinct 9. I'm concerned about the meetings, well, I guess the community meetings will happen after the articles, articles are formulated, is that right? Decided on and voted on.
Yes, that's correct. However, there are 4 public hearings that'll happen in the senior center where anyone can come in and provide input prior to a vote being taken by the board. The community meetings are to provide outreach to town meeting members.
Well, my question is, in these public meetings, there are so many articles, and I understand at first they're going to be presented, then you're going to discuss it for a while, and then after that, the public gets to say something. By then it's what, 10 o'clock. I just feel,
I'll sit here as long as anybody's waiting to speak.
well, not everybody can stay this long.
Well,
And
Hey,
I think that, given how many articles there are, that's just not, like I echo what Asha said, just not enough time. Especially, I talk to people too, like walk the dog when they go, I'm gonna take this. So, these are gonna make big changes in our town.
we'll have, I realize that it seems daunting, and it seems like a big task, but it's nothing that we haven't done before. And the idea is to have as much public input as possible, and we will allow for that, and that'll all happen. And that's why we've scheduled 4 nights of meetings.
Well,
And
one is
we
on
can,
signs.
and some people will, many of these won't have a whole lot of discussion. Signs may or may not have a lot of discussion, for example. We'll give that some time. But as we get to the ones that people are concerned with, there's a reason that these have been broken up over 4 nights and scheduled appropriately, so that there is plenty of time to allow for every person that comes to this meeting and wants to have a say, to have their say.
How many articles, excuse me, I just want to ask a question. How many articles per night?
How many articles do we have?
We
I think it
divided
varies.
it up.
Yeah, it's about 5 to 6
Individual articles?
individuals.
And many of those go hand in
A
hand.
lot of them are overlapping, right?
Yeah.
Mr. like to correct your impression of past history. The way we're doing this year is unprecedented. There has never been anything like this before, with so little notice. Some such changes as these might be considered comparable to in magnitude. They talked about for a year and a half. You're allowing the public to hear this for a month before town meeting. This is unprecedented.
We've been
regardless
discussing
of
these, Jenny, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've been discussing these since at least the fall, if not last spring.
That's right. That is when we started the discussion.
Mhm.
I had another question. There are going to be illustrations and shadow studies, which are going to be sent to you. Do we get to see these?
Of course.
When?
Well, we were just talking about that before, and so we'll clarify exactly when we think we're going to get them. We thought it would be by the end of this month, but they got a late start on the project. So we will find out precisely when, but ideally it will be on the 25th at that meeting. which
And
is
as soon
the
as it's made
evening that
public
this
to us,
board will
it's made
talk
public
about it
on
again.
the town website, and a copy is kept at the,
Okay, because there was some
Planning department.
discussion about sending it to you, and I understand you need to see them.
Mhm.
But do we get to see them?
You get to see it as soon as it's ready to go.
Before the
Nothing is done in secret. That's why we have open meeting
If it's
laws.
available before the 25th, but as I mentioned, it was proposed that they would be finished the work, the build-out analysis, the shadow studies, and the visualizations by the end of February, but because they had a late start, my guess is that we might not get it at the end of this month. I hope that we will, and we'll clarify that with MAPC.
So the community meetings are really to introduce and persuade, basically, town meeting members of this plan, but it's already been voted on, right? I mean, there's nothing that can be said at that meeting that would
Well, as with anything else, any zoning changes come under the purview of the redevelopment board. We're asked to either endorse or take no action on these items. Then they go from here to town meeting, where they can be further amended and discussed.
No, the community meetings are in between.
Sure, and so that's a point. That's another opportunity for people to become educated about the changes that are being proposed.
Well, would hope that the community meeting would be an opportunity for people to discuss what they want.
And
Not
that's-
just be educated and get the materials, but to decide.
I think we're going to go in circles here, and we have additional business to discuss. So if you have anything further to say, I'm happy to listen, but let's take it outside of the context of this meeting.
Okay.
The schedule is made at this point. We can't push the public hearings out any further.
So just to note here, so in the outreach plan, we do intend to outreach directly to town meeting members as soon as possible. And so that means that town meeting members can attend any of these hearings as they typically do.
And I encourage
in
them all
fact,
to.
3 plus potentially 1 more are here tonight. So I think that town meeting members will attend the public hearings. I fully anticipate that. Same way with zoning recodification. We had many town meeting members attend those meetings. There was actually the same process again in zoning recodification, where we had the public hearings and then there was a little bit of overlap into the neighborhood meetings. And it is as much an educational process for many town meeting members as it is for those who have been more engaged and want to be at all of the public hearings. There are plenty of opportunities to participate. So we will do that outreach pending the allowance of emailing directly to town meeting members through the moderator.
I'm a town meeting member, and
Yeah.
I would like to say that as regards the input I get from the constituents in my precinct, they are completely unaware of any of this. And I do not think that in the course of the next 2 months that I'm going to be able to get enough input from them as to how I should go, because they just don't know what is happening. This is happening so quickly, about 6 times as fast as has ever happened in the past. It's not appropriate.
Thank you all for your comments. Let's move on to the next agenda item.
Okay.
Updates to design standards.
Right, so,
Jenny.
so this is actually just this is something I just wanted to bring to your attention, that the residential study group has filed through the town manager, asked for an appropriation request to be able to get funding to hire a consultant who will help us to prepare residential design guidelines, and then potentially a process by which we can do design review, whether it's through, could be a subcommittee of this board, or it could be part of another potential board. So we haven't figured out that piece yet, but the funding would allow us to actually develop residential design guidelines and then create a process for actually doing design review. Right now, how this relates to the commercial and the design standards that this board currently has in place, we would be able to either amend those design standards and create one package, or create a separate package that's just related to residential design standards. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Is this, sorry,
Yes.
is this creating another level of review? Or is this a review for the regulations and alterations? I'm a little confused there.
It would be a review of any new home construction in particular. So R1, R2, where the primary, R0, R1, R2 are the primary areas where they're talking about doing residential design standards. But we have yet to actually, that would be part of the study, would be to explore where we can actually apply residential design standards.
And based on the
And
studies
then
that
what
have come,
process would happen.
and based on the work that the residential study group has done, research that's been conducted, that's where people really feel the pinch the most, with large additions and redeveloped lots turning from single families into two families, et cetera, et cetera.
So this study group now becomes the authority of approving or not approving?
No, the residential study group would still be the same residential study group, which is a subset of the master plan implementation committee at this current time. That doesn't mean that members of that group wouldn't necessarily want to apply or be part of whatever this design review process might be. But that process would be studied and determined as part of when we hire a consultant to help us to think it through.
And this is just an appropriation to
It's
start
an
the process,
appropriation
not even
request.
getting down to creating another review board yet, just to put a process in place to potentially get down there, to that point in the road.
And the recommendation is coming out of a report that our department has been in the process of completing for the residential study group, which actually studies the issue of replacement housing or tear downs in the community to understand what the impacts are of new homes in existing residential neighborhoods, which, as you know, is the charge of the residential study group. And one of the recommendations is to look at design standards.
Does this group exist anywhere else in the state of Massachusetts?
Design review committees?
Yes.
Very often.
Would they
yes.
decide on additions and knockdowns and tear downs and stuff like that?
They may opine on a variety of different types of design reviews, whether it's for commercial, residential, all types of development.
How do they fit into the normal zoning or special permit process?
Normally they fit under the planning board and they're advisory and make a recommendation to a planning board. Sometimes they're a separate design review board. Erin actually and Kelly, mine on our staff, they both looked at this particular issue. And so actually if you had other questions about design review committees, Erin could probably answer that as well.
I mean, there's a variety of different ways that they can be applied. Typically, as Jenny said, they sit under a planning board and are advisory to a planning board. That doesn't mean that we have to follow that typical format. As Jenny has mentioned, as part of the study, so one part is actually creating a public process around what those guidelines should be. The second part of the study is to evaluate the organization at the town of Arlington and the applicable boards and see where a design review board could fit in most appropriately based on the charge that was developed through the public process.
Can you give some examples of a couple of towns that does that right now so I can see how they work?
So for, in a previous position that I held in the town of Wellesley, we had a design review board that what was separate from the planning board, but was advisory to the planning board. They reviewed projects that were applicable or that required site plan review. It's termed something different in Wellesley, but generally that's what it was. They reviewed all signage and they reviewed all large house construction. So primarily, so their charge was a range of things. That doesn't necessarily need to be what is put into place in Arlington.
So is it similar fashion as, say, the Historic Commission?
It could be thought of the same way, but design review boards are typically advisory. They don't have any authority to make decisions in the way that the Historical Commission does, or the Historic Districts Commission does. But same idea in some ways, but typically advisory without an authority.
Mr. Revelak.
Steve Revelak, 1 Sunnyside Avenue. Recently, I happened across water towns, residential design guidelines. So, I mean, is that kind of the model that we're looking at? Or okay, because
yeah. So Watertown, if you were to search it online, they have a good example of what their residential design standards are that they encourage within the community. So as Steve pointed out, it is one of the communities that I looked at in support of this report to the residential study group that Jenny had mentioned at the start of the agenda item.
So most of the single-family homes and even, doubles that replace singles are built as of right. They don't come to us.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I'm having a little hard time understanding if this design review committee is only advisory and somebody wants to build a single-family home on a vacant lot and they don't have to go to us and they don't have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. How does the process work when it's just an advisory body?
It's advisory. There's no requirement to incorporate these features that might be, adopted. However, I would say that if there's been a public process around something like design standards that is embraced by the community, then it would be a nice thing to incorporate these ideas. I use the word advisory again here just because that's the typical condition. The organizational review could suggest that they need to have an authority, a requirement. So that would flip the comment on the head and make it a requirement for even by right construction to follow these standards.
Go ahead, Steve.
with going back to Watertown's guidelines, they seem to be organized in, you can do this, but we prefer that you do that instead. And in most of the cases, the things that they're, the standards that they're advocating, it was nice. So I could see, it's one of those things where I can easily see someone, just saying, oh yeah, I didn't think of that, and I'll go that way. I've even seen similar things that, some of the projects that have undergone ER, where you'll suggest to an architect changes, and sometimes it's just something the architect didn't think of, and they say, oh yeah, I think you're right.
Will this be mandatory for people who want to build?
Again, it may not need to be. It would depend on the review that would be completed by a consultant that looks at the organizational structure, looks at the public process that was completed, and makes a recommendation to the town on what they think would be the best policy for Arlington.
So right now, where we are in the process is the residential study group is asking the town manager to appropriate money to begin this process, to begin the study. This is just kind of the preamble to that. So
it'll be a warrant article for town meeting to decide upon whether or not they wish to appropriate funding towards this study, and then potentially the design standards would come out of that, and then a recommended process, which could either be part of an existing board or process or something brand new.
And would they be asking us to either take action or no action on that warrant article?
in the future, not for an appropriation.
Not in an appropriation, right?
Okay.
Only if it goes into zoning.
Not for a study.
Right,
Not
but
for
I'm saying
appropriation,
if
but next
ultimately
year,
we-
yes.
If
Yeah,
it doesn't
we'll
go
be-
into the zoning bylaw, then we don't get it. to say.
Wait, so your design standards right now are not part of the zoning bylaw? They're a separate standalone document, so it may be the same situation that you have right now.
It's certainly a discussion to
But
continue
we
having.
would follow that up.
Yep. Ms. Preston?
How much is the appropriation for, and how will the consultant be chosen, and by whom?
Sure. I think the appropriation is for $50,000, and the same way that we do every time we look for a consultant, we do a request for proposals, we post it, we develop criteria, we usually have an evaluation committee of people and evaluate the respondents based on that criteria, and then select them after that, looking at their credentials and checking references, looking at their work products, and then we contract with them, and then they do the work. Now, who would be overseeing that process? We haven't determined that just yet. It did come from the residential study group, so my guess is that that group will be highly involved, but probably other members from other departments, from other boards and commissions will also want to have a role in the process, but we haven't designed that piece yet. Okay.
Good. Moving on to agenda item number 5, progress on the master plan and housing production plan implementation, and so on.
Take one and pass it. This is just, the handout is just I believe you may have seen this. This was from December 5th. This was the mid-year update to special town meeting from the master plan implementation committee, and then also in your packet this evening was just the updated master plan implementation committee matrix, which is an implementation table that shows. So there's the housing production plan, which has a similar implementation table and identifies who's doing what's the term for getting it done, and how far have we come since we adopted the plan. And then the second item in the packet is the master plan implementation table, which outlines actions, which element of the master plan you're advancing. I have an extra packet here.
It's already in.
The packet meaning the one that was online.
The packet is online, right?
Okay.
So, and I just wanted to bring to your attention the various things that are being implemented, what's going on. Thought it would be interesting for you to see this. We had the Housing Plan Implementation Committee met recently, and for that meeting, we provided an update on the housing production plan and what has been done thus far. So I thought I would just share that with you so that you had that material, because obviously some of the articles that we're going to be talking about do relate to the housing production plan as well as the master plan. And some of the things relate to existing affordable housing production that we're doing right now, different zoning amendments that we are proposing and how those relate back to the housing production plan, previous zoning amendments that have occurred that also were recommended through the housing production plan, and how we're monitoring affordable housing that's in town, what our requirements are. There was some concern at the time that when we adopted the housing production plan that Millbrook Square deed restriction was actually set to expire. It's been extended to 2032. We expanded the home improvement loan program to allow to apply to up to 4 units in a structure. And then some social service networks that we're trying to work with in town to address broader social needs in relationship to housing stability.
Good.
So I just wanted to share this information with you so you had on your radar the variety of work that we're doing right now, and then just in general how these things relate to both the housing production plan and the master plan. And see if you had any questions.
It was helpful to see all of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Master Plan Implementation Committee, I think their next meeting is March.
March
7th.
15th.
March 15th?
Yeah.
Did you move it? Or do I just have it wrong?
You have it wrong. I sent it.
I know,
a
I know.
reminder.
March
Wait,
15th.
now I'm concerned.
No, I'm sure you're right.
Nope. March 7th.
March 7th.
Ah, I was right.
The 15th is a Friday. I didn't do that.
Okay, great. March 7th, Thursday night. So that's the next time that we'll be going over this. And then also that will give the Master Plan Implementation Committee an opportunity, as they have done in the past, to provide you with their commentary about the zoning bylaw amendments and anything else that's forthcoming for town meeting.
Could I just, as a member of the Housing Plan Implementation Committee, I'd just like to point out that the actual amendments were never discussed in the committee. They were mentioned, and various avenues for different types of housing were discussed. There was probably should be more emphasis on affordable housing, but there was actually no discussion of the articles themselves, none whatsoever.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, that was it.
Anything else here? Nothing further on our agenda this evening, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motioned.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.